Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this second panel on today's conference on the collaborative economy. The title of this panel is The Advantages and Weaknesses of a Collaborative Economy, an Exchange of Practices. We have here today representatives of three companies offering services and platforms in the field of the collaborative economy. Victoria Veverkova, who is the Business and Operations Manager of Juve, a Slovak home services platform. Mr. Matej Cher, the Procurator of the Avantcar company, and he is the initiator of the Avant2Go car sharing project for electric vehicles. Also with us is Ms. Zarja Mavec, owner and director of Inalbea, an expert for renting through Airbnb. Also with us is Mrs. Breda Cotin, president of the Slovene Consumers Association, and Mr. Peter Sušnik, who is the managing director of the City Hotel in Ljubljana. Now this is an exchange of best practices, so let us start with representatives of platforms. I would first like to ask Ms. Veverkova to present the services of your Juve platform.
Okay. Okay, I hope that it was clear what we do, and maybe at the beginning I shortly say how it arose, how the Juve arose. It was an idea of the owner of the Juve, the owner of the Juve who was abroad and used the service of the Airbnb and rented the flat in abroad. And when he came to this flat, he found a dysfunctional toilet. And what now? He came to this flat from the airport by using of the Uber services. And as I already mentioned it, also they use the Airbnb, and he is still the fan of the collaborative economy, of the platform of the collaborative economy. So as I say, what now? The solution should be easy. He will find, or he must find somebody, or the craftsman, or the Uber for the craftsmen, and this problem will be solved. But he did not find any proper available services in the surrounding, in this country, and he remembered this fact, and after a quick monitoring of such services availability over the world, he decided to create own platform for such services. So this is the reason why the Juve is now here, not in Slovenia, but now in Slovakia, Czech Republic, and also in Spain. And what Juve stands for? Juve is the platform for the communication between the customers and who need to do something with the second side, with the people who know to do it. And especially at the beginning, we intend to manage the communication between the customer and individual people only who want to earn the extra money outside their job. But in reality, we see that in our application, there are not only individuals, but also the craftsmen. Many craftsmen get extra business by help of our application. So we have the both. On the one side, the customer, on the second side, the craftsman professional, and also to individuals who only want to occasionally provide these services and who know some skills and abilities in the craftsman services, maybe the simple, much simple craftsman services. So In comparison with the standard way of ways of using such services via net or maybe the yellow pages, the Juve is much simpler and faster because we connect the people with the craftsmen and suppliers online, and the business contract can be agreed in a very short time, maybe a few minutes. In reality, in our application, the most of contracts were agreed in a few hours. And also we are much simple because with the whole process of finding the craftsmen or maybe the handy neighbors, we will concentrate in the one typing of the request in our application, which is immediately sent to the relevant suppliers in the surrounding. And if the suppliers are interested, can reply by sending a direct offer or maybe ask some additional information via chat. And when the customer receives a few offers, he can select the best one, and the finalized process is, of course, the rating. Rating system is our application. Customers and craftsmen can rate each others. It's very simple and very faster. It's all. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Could I ask now Mr. Cher to introduce to us the Avant2Go service, which is now available in Slovenia.
Hello everyone, thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to share our passions and concepts that we are dealing with. We are a mobility provider, and we are looking for ways how to make mobility as simple as possible, as inexpensive, environmentally friendly, and how to provide the functionalities as well. First of all, through evolution and recently through revolution, we have now come to a point where we decided to merge three modern concepts available through technology. First of all, the sharing economy. Instead of 10, 20 people having an own car each, where we know that for 23 hours those cars are parked idle, we can instead share the same car. The second concept is electrical mobility, meaning that when we are using this vehicle, we are not polluting the environment. And the third concept is that the energy required for mobility is produced in a clean way, and that it is produced at home. So we do not depend on global fuels, because we can run out of them. Or let's say if the borders are shut down, we cannot import any oil. If a war should happen and the oil price can become double, and if we know that in every GDP euro we have a 20% of margin that is collected, well, all of that tells you that we depend on fuel that cannot be produced domestically. At the same time, we are polluting as well. So if we merge all of this, we come to an electrical car sharing, and Avant2Go is something that merges all these three concepts together. Thank you. And now Mrs. Zaira Mavec, who will tell us more about her company and Airbnb. Well, we are a real estate company, and we started looking at Airbnb, and it was a natural development. You have more and more apartment owners empty who started offering them for a short-term rental. And this, in fact, is a trend that is very much present in the rentals market. We developed our service on the existing platform, very well known next to Booking. It is the best known. But we developed our service because clients needed it. People were coming to me, asking me, how does Airbnb work? I don't want to be involved in undeclared work. I want to use a platform. So, first of all, we help people to register in the framework of what is available. in the rentals market. There is a lot of confused people out there in the market who don't know where to turn. There is a lot of rules and regulations, and it is only right that these people have an interlocutor. We are some sort of consultants. We help them much faster and in a much more elegant way. But then we made a step further. People said, well, I have a job, I have children. Do you want to rent the apartment out instead of me? So we are introducing Airbnb management. We are the ones who are assuming the role of a host in Airbnb. So people saw that there is an opportunity for income, that there was money out there. As we heard before, this is not something that you could do exclusively unless you own several apartments, but that means you need also a lot of capital. So what we do is we help apartment owners to carry out, to complete the process, to be there to receive guests, and also the more tourist part that is also necessary. Mrs. Kutin, your organization represents consumer interests. But on the other hand, maybe your organization too is an example of collaborative economy. Can you tell us, how do you see this model? And what are you perceiving when it comes to collaborative economy? What are your observations? Good morning. Well, when speaking to some of you a while ago, I said that maybe our Consumer Protection Association is also a form of collaborative economy. Well, our organization was established almost 27 years ago because some individuals said, we want to do something. We didn't have any premises, we didn't have any money, we just had an idea in our heads. If you ask today, what is Consumer Protection Association? People will say, well, you are paid by the government, aren't you? Well, maybe this year we will be funded by the government in the amount of 10%. It used to be 30% in our best times. But when people have questions concerning legislation, if they want to complain, they come to us. So we had to abolish our phone line because we had more than 1,000 calls every month. People called us saying, I just have a little question. But I just don't want to complain only. We have more than 9,000 members who pay their membership fee. For the 22nd year, we are active in the European Consumer Association. We became members before Slovenia even started negotiating about membership. So this is also a channel that provides us with a lot of information. We test products and services. We have more than 200 tests, and we have 850,000 unique visitors to our website. We also carried out the first collective switch to another provider. That was collaborative economy. More than 40,000 people registered, and then at the end of the day, 1/3 of those in fact switched to another electricity provider. And collectively, they saved €1 million. If all 40,000 switched to another provider, we would have saved €3.5 million. So now, we as an organization need to follow new business models to be able to survive and to develop. We believe we are an important organization. We are trying to resume the dialogue that we used to have with our government and government institutions. We were considered as a major player, as an important stakeholder, which we are according to the legislation. However, with time, our importance has been lost in a way. It seems that the society doesn't understand sufficiently why a consumer organization is needed as an interlocutor, as a stake player. And even though our consumers are aware of the importance of consumer protection, they are still asking, what can I get? What is the government going to give me? And unless we continue and unless we understand that collaborative economy, well, you can use any other term, unless we understand that it is also an opportunity to work together even closer, to become active as consumers, let us not just wait and accept everything that is being offered to us without understanding what it is that we actually need. We also need to draw the line when it comes to our privacy. We need to draw the line. This is my privacy. This is what I'm willing to share, and this is what I'm not willing to share. We know that big multinationals are using our data without our consent just because we used this or that platform. But who says it has to be this way? At the European level, we have noticed that the number of online purchases has gone down because people simply don't trust. Actually, our privacy is also being referred to as the new oil because it's so precious. So I hope that we are going to continue working on consumer protection and to be involved in legislative processes whenever we are allowed to. I must say that at the European level, the situation is much better than at the Slovenian level. In Slovenia, we are not sufficiently aware that it is needed. We believe that the legislation, whatever it will be, has to be drafted in such a way that non-profit models are allowed. People working together should be allowed, and the legislation should be an encouragement, not a barrier. So I think that here, the European and a global approach are extremely important. Thank you. We'll come back to that. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Peter Sušnik. One of the characteristics of collaborative economy is that it has shaken the traditional markets and things are being set up anew. You are working in a traditional sector that has existed for centuries. How do you see this? What does short-term rentals competition mean to you, to hotels, and how do you respond? Thank you for giving me the floor, and thank you for the invitation. I would also like to thank previous speakers who tried to define collaborative economy, although I don't see what is collaboration in that notion, because it's just a traditional activity. Income is generated, some is used for cost, some for profit. So the point of view of the Worldwide Hotel Association is quite clear. This is a phenomenon that has shaken the traditional hotels economy, because we saw that someone who is completely unregulated is allowed to perform on a market that is completely regulated. We don't see this as a threat. In Ljubljana, there are supposed to be 500 units that are rented out through Airbnb every day. So this would be the size of the Union Hotel Group. So if you build a hotel with 500 rooms today, that would be a serious investment involving bureaucratic procedures, looking for all the permits, looking for solutions in terms of traffic, hygiene, taxation. In collaborative economy, in Airbnb, all of this is absent. So a buyer who comes to Ljubljana can afford to find accommodation in the city center, where, as we know, we cannot expect a major hotel to be built with all the expected capacity. So there is a certain degree of unfairness and inequality. In the United States, this situation is even less regulated. And now we see that the World Hotel Association is pointing out that all players need to say whether this activity is a two-tier activity. There are two different channels, and once we have equal or level playing field, then we can adapt. In the current period, where we see significant economic growth, and we see that Slovenia is interesting for tourists, so at this moment we do not feel any major pressures. Our business model has remained the same. We do our service, we're trying to convince our guests that our service is worth their money, and I'm convinced that traditional hotels can beat anyone who is renting rooms, because what we are offering, we offer more for the money that the customer is paying than the shorter rentals. But of course, there is enough room for everyone. We just need the rules. What are the main threats of Airbnb? Airbnb is a threat not so much to the hotel, but to the community. In the United States and in Slovenia, and Mrs. Mavec can confirm this, you have professional investors who buy at least 2 units, but even more, with the intention to rent them out through online platforms. It may be Booking.com, which is a very good opportunity for hotels as well, or Airbnb. So we have 40% of all income generated by professional apartment owners. In bigger cities like San Francisco or New York, this has turned into such a big problem that it is now threatening the real estate market for those who are citizens who want to live a normal life. And when tourists are not there, these cities turn into ghost cities. This has also resulted in people moving to the suburbs because they cannot afford such high rents. So this is a platform worth 30 billion. They have an excellent commission for what they do, and we have a model that is not on equal footing with everything else we know. And all of this is due to the notion sharing economy. It is characterized as a sharing economy, but nothing is shared. VAT should be paid, all other taxes should be paid. So you cannot say that because this is a sharing economy, rules are different, knowing that some people bought 4 or 5 apartments just to rent them. We pay tourist tax, we pay VAT, and these people are not paying it. I think we tackle one of major issues, and we are going to try and answer these issues, and that is the distinction between occasional rentals and more professional rentals, or performing a traditional economic activity, if you will. This is also an issue when it comes to drafting legislation. Last summer, European Commission issued a communication and they published some guidelines as to how to draw the distinction between proper occasional rentals and professional rentals. They recommended the introduction of thresholds. This would be one possible solution. But when it comes to taxation, licensing, regulation of collaborative economy, the European Commission recommended that countries work with platforms in identifying what is a traditional economic activity and what is a more occasional activity. That's also important from the point of view of taxation. Mrs. Mavets, can you perhaps share your experience with us? One thing is impact on the market. This is what Mr. Sushnik was just speaking about. And the second thing concerns regulation. We know Airbnb is such an example. In Amsterdam, in London, thresholds are already in place. How does it work, and has it achieved the purpose? Well, there have been so many points, I don't even know where to start. Of course, Airbnb is not just a sharing economy. It can be very profitable. I know people are buying apartments. I get calls every day. Find me an apartment that I can rent out through Airbnb. What is happening? Well, I heard that my neighbor is earning a lot of money. I want to do it as well. But you have to know that Slovenian market is highly specific and highly seasonal. We are not Paris, we are not New York or London, where you have tourists throughout the year. Airbnb in Ljubljana or in Bled is mostly profitable between May and November. So yes, you earn money, but you also have to do something else. And people earning money throughout the year, they are bound by the legislation. They have to be registered as a legal entity, and they're paying taxes because they have to. And people who are renting out 4 apartments, they cannot do this without declaring. Maybe they were doing this in the beginning, but now our inspection services too have learned about Airbnb and sharing economy, so it's not possible anymore. They know where to look, they know how transactions are carried out. They are maybe just warning people, but they are learning, and they can also check things retrospectively. So people don't dare not to declare anymore. So people are calling me every day because they don't know what to do, but they want to find some sort of a solution. So yes, there is a difference between professional renting and Airbnb. Yes, it is. Airbnb is an additional income, but it's not something that can be your primary activity. Many apartments that used to be rented for a long-term period, maybe it's because some multinationals left, some embassies left, some companies left, so these apartments were left empty. So out of a need, they turned to Airbnb, because a few years ago, it was not possible to get an apartment for less than 9 months. They were saying, well, at least 1 year, and even then you had to repaint the apartment once you left and so on. But now Slovenians opened their doors and they found that the bricks can earn them money. Now, something that could only be rented out in the long run can be rented out in the short run as well, so they can fill their capacities, and the market has changed significantly. Before, it was just students who wanted to rent an apartment, but that was a different category of apartments, and it was also for foreigners coming to Slovenia, and also for people who couldn't afford to buy an apartment. It was seen that if you paid a rent, it was throwing money away. But it's definitely not a good idea to hire a loan and to buy an apartment to rent it out through Airbnb. Airbnb is intended if you have spare capacities. Now, can Airbnb be competition to traditional hotels? Well, we are speaking about people who are looking not just for accommodation, but also for experience, people who want to have the local experience. This is why the slogan is "Welcome home." Come to my home and I will show you what Slovenia is all about. This is what they don't get to that extent in hotels. There is still a segment of people who are not even interested in Airbnb rentals, but would always go to a hotel. Particularly when it comes to the center of Ljubljana, I don't think Airbnb is competition. In the suburbs, perhaps, or if you go further out of the center, I can say that services of Airbnb have improved, and that's a good thing, isn't it? Mr. Sushnik, how have you adapted to this sort of competition? What was your response? Have you responded? And if so, how? Well, it is difficult to adapt your offer. Are you going to turn your hotel into a block of apartments that you can rent out through short-term rentals? And this is not something that we would like to do either. We would just like to emphasize that the way you treat, the way you handle your rental is different in a hotel than in Airbnb. But it's not fair to say that the amount of Airbnb apartments is not impacting what the hotels are experiencing during the high season. In Slovenia, high season is between March and end of October, relatively long, and Airbnb during that season are very competitive and their capacities are always full. So what we are doing is we are allowing more people in rooms, so we have family-friendly rooms, because we know that families will always calculate whether it is worthwhile renting a room or Airbnb. And secondly, we are trying to offer things that you don't want to be concerned with during your holidays, and that is cooking, parking. So you afford a holiday where you don't have to cook, you will have a fresh breakfast, you will not have to tidy up, you will not have to worry about parking. But of course, if you want to save money, go ahead. You can rent an apartment, but you will be left to your own devices, and probably you will also have to pay at the end of your stay for the cleaning. Okay. Another thing is thresholds and distinction between occasional and professional. Do you think that introducing thresholds is a solution? Mrs. Kutin, do you think this is a good solution? Is this a model that is going to work? And how can it impact the market if you introduce a threshold of 60 days per year? I am not going to discuss what the threshold should be in order to make a distinction whether it is an occasional or a professional rental. I have data of 4 consumer organizations from Belgium, Italy, Spain, and Portugal. They are part of Euroconsumers, and they came to the conclusion, they made a research in 2015, and they found out that 70% of consumers have participated in sharing economy in one way or another. They were either looking for accommodation or they were sharing a car. But it's quite clear why they're looking for these solutions, because it is more affordable. We also see that there is a new profile. They call it prosumer. I'm not sure if we have a word in Slovenian at the moment. So you are renting out a room in an apartment, and somebody else is using it, or you take someone in your car when you travel. This is something that people are looking for, but you have to know that this also involves certain risks. Consumer legislation at the moment doesn't govern these relations. You have to know that if you join someone in their car and you are involved in a traffic accident, consequences can be quite serious if the car is not insured. So we'll have to think thoroughly how to govern and how to regulate the non-profit collaboration, cooperation. If, for example, you have people who have solar power plant on the roofs of their houses, and if they provide the excessive electricity into the national grid, of course you don't want to tax such people so that they lose their pensions. So you have to provide for a right solution. We used to envisage some sort of vouchers and stuff, but I don't think that was the right solution. So there is a lot of work ahead of us. We have to make a distinction. What is an economic activity which is a competitive and not a collaborative activity? And on the other hand, what are the new models where people offer things in order to improve the utilization of cars, for example? I think that technology in the years to come is going to bring many things that we are not even aware of.
So again, thresholds, yes or no? Yes, I think yes. Maybe not in the number of days, but in the income generated on an annual basis. Now, in my view, who is the real Airbnb user in terms of a sharing economy? I have a customer who is divorced, and he rents a larger apartment out in the days when they are not, the kids are not with them. So it seems that it's somehow an additional cost that he is able to cover this way. So I have other people who are now retired, and she said, okay, maybe I'll lock up one room, or maybe my daughter will be there when she's visiting, or whatever. But on the days when I'm not using it, I will rent it out, because that way it's easier for me to make it through the month. She said, for instance, well, for me it would be enough for me just to pay the monthly bills and maybe get something extra per month. So these are the real Airbnb providers, or students maybe with their rooms. These are the real users and providers. So yes, thresholds, yes, but I would say rather in terms of revenue, not in terms of days. Mr. Sushnik, yes, I fully agree with what was said. I think it's only right to say that this economy is just like any other, and revenue generated this way will be taxed just like any other revenue. If it's an economic activity, you have to register yourself. If you are renting out as a natural person, you have to then report this income as your personal income. So there are no problems here. I, of course, cannot imagine that somebody would go out and control whether somebody had guests 59 days, 60 days, or 61 days. So I think, yes, we need a threshold in line with the existing tax legislation. Okay, so we have a new disruptive technology here on the market. Ms. Verkova also mentioned earlier why things are happening in such a way. The rigidity of markets is a problem sometimes. So offering repairs at home, for instance, that is something that is often a problem. It's difficult to find somebody within the hour to come to your house and fix a leaking faucet or whatever. It's difficult to find people for that. So my question is, how does the impact of all this influence other market players? Do they then start acting differently? How does that influence the market?
I don't think that we are big competitors for the existing players. I think that this cannot to feel this threatened because this type of this is only the different way of the communication, the better way, simple way, faster way. So I think that they must take their possibility and enjoy in this economy, and also use the advantage of this economy. It is not threatened, and the many of this platform, including our platform, only to find a hole in the market. As I said, many people, many customers were not able to find some not craftsmen, the professional for the typing some or for the repairing some simple work, some cheaper which not much cheaper and the activity, and we find them the providers for the services. And I think if the standard player want to do the same, they have possibilities to enjoy, and many craftsmen enjoy in our application. So I think that they take their opportunities and enjoy us too.
Ravno to, če se navežem na to, me zanima, prej je bil problem.
Okay, so coming back to that, there is a problem. In the past, our problem was how to find the right provider for a repair at home. So my question now is, how come professional providers now all of a sudden appeared through your platform, but before they were so difficult to find? So what is it that your platform offers that makes such a difference?
You mean in comparison with the standard players, or this difference? Differences. No, our difference is much that we provide in this communication more comfortable. This communication is much simpler as the communication is faster. Yes, because in current environment, the people want to solve the not problems, but they events very fastly because they need to time for other activities. So I think that it is the different in comparison with the standards players, because our service is very comfortable and very simple. So.
Hvala.
Thank you very much. Now, we talked about disruption of markets, and of course one thing is disrupting the way services are offered. The other aspect is mentality. A very important factor in a collaborative economy is this shift in mentality. One thing is the need to own, the other is the need or the desire to be able to use certain goods. So car sharing has become a big hit worldwide. Why do you think that is the case? And I would like to know, from the Slovenian point of view, we Slovenes tend to be very much attached to our cars. So how can you make it with the concept of car sharing in such a mentality?
Mogoče bi se mičken lotil filozofije še, ker mislim, da glavni problem je v izobraženosti. In če kadarkoli je danes hitrost učenja in prilagajanje ključna diferenciacija, ključna konkurenčna prednost. Danes nobena služba za nedoločen čas, noben milijon na banki, nobeno lastništvo podjetja ni več varnost.
Any possibility to do anything faster than learn. And learning is the true industrial revolution. If you look at the stress, if you look at all the things that are happening, the point is that we weren't able to understand quickly enough what's happening, and that led to wars, that led to economic depressions. And the crucial thing today, therefore, is for us to be able to understand what the point of things is. And the point here is very simple. For the first time in history, everything in the world is interconnected. And because everything is interconnected, the truth is coming out. It's becoming more and more difficult to manipulate. It's becoming more and more difficult to complicate things. And it's becoming easy to make life simple and to share. 10 years ago, our whole economy was based on excessive production and excessive consumption, and now all of a sudden this is saturated. Now all of a sudden loans are available, leasing plans, cars are being produced and bought, but each and every one of us has at least 10 things at home that cost more than €1,000, and you don't use them more than once a month. And in the past this worked better. Good marketing, the need to expose yourself. You had various levers which led to these decisions, but today things are simply becoming very, very difficult to function in this way. The profit margins are very low in traditional industry, and that is why this sort of connectivity is very important. Now, coming back to your question, I'll answer by asking a counter question. How many of you would decide, I no longer need to own a car if I can double my standard of living? Or if for the same standard of living I need to work half the time? But until you explain that, until you understand that, you won't do it. So again, we are in terms of awareness raising and learning. €1,000 is the average net wage in Slovenia. Average cost of a vehicle is about €500 per month. And we have more than one vehicle per employed person. So 80% of all employed persons drive for less than 20 kilometers per day. Well, we can't hear the speaker without a mic, sorry. Yes, but that is what we're doing. Well, if you're ready, I'm also ready to wager my belongings and my career on what I just said. So what is easier, raising a salary from 1,000 to 1,400, or to bring down the cost of mobility per month from 500 to €100? So that's the point. €4,000 a month is €5,000 a year. Or you need to work 40% less for the same standard, or considerably more if you opt for the other option. And these are the savings which you can generate in this collaborative economy, and then you generate the new purchasing power. You can buy better food, you can pay for more education, etc. So this is the opportunity for new growth, rational use of resources. And we can do that because we are interconnected, because everything is interconnected. This offers greater security. You can develop peer-to-peer economy. I can offer services one-on-one without having to establish a company and go through all the accounting and all the other processes that you need, because we're going to collaborate via an application, and this application is already directly linked to the tax man. The moment we do something, the moment a transaction is made, it's taxed. The point is that through connectivity, through a digitalized economy, we can afford to do this. All cars can be interconnected. We can see which cars are available. It's easy to share. So I wouldn't simplify things as much as the other speakers would say. An important sharing platform is Netflix or iTunes. You share music. 10 years ago, you had to buy your own CD every month. You know how much money that cost? 10, 20, 30 euros. Today, €5 a month buys you all the music in this world. And we're sharing. And then if you look at the amount of elderly people in Slovenia who have large houses, 3 empty rooms and €400 pension. Why build new houses, destroy land, pollute if we can just better utilize what we have. And that lady would then have 800 euros per month instead of 300 euros per month because she would be renting out rooms. So to answer your question, when we start understanding things, when we become aware of these things, when our collective mentality goes up to this level, then we will start collaborating. The reason why we're on this earth is to collaborate, to improve the quality of our lives and to preserve humanity. That is the point. And through this new economy, people are understanding the way things really are, and I think that a new renaissance of humanity is on the rise. Thank you very much. I think that's a very good point of departure. We've heard many different opinions here, and I think this could be a good sort of point of departure for concluding our debate. That is what I'm interested in. Do you think this is a model that is going to replace the existing economic model, or is it only going to complement it? And before you answer, the current economic model is growth-based, growth of GDP. You mentioned earlier. Now, is my problem how to increase my monthly income by so and so many euros, or how to decrease my expenses? So if we go into the savings model by decreasing cost, then this will mean no growth. So the concept of growth, as we know it, has to change. So is it about changing the model, or is it about complementing the existing economic model? That, I think, is the closing question that I would put to the panel. Well, it's not completely true what you say. I certainly believe that the new economy, the future economy, is no longer going to be based on growth, but on the other hand, this does not mean that we are making savings. We are giving sense to the way we utilize our resources. If we need to just produce one car instead of 10, we pollute the earth 9 times less. We use 9 times less fuel to transport parts, 9 times less time. We need to build 9 times less houses. We need to print 9 times less houses. If I wanted to tell my girlfriend I love you 10 years ago, somebody had to chop a tree down, make a piece of paper, I had to send that to the other side of the world. Today, I just send that, and no tree needs to fall. So, if we're talking about revolutions and innovation, the point is that through these new technologies, new knowledges, we are just giving new sense to our existence. So, stop destroying and create more time. We will have shorter working hours for people to have the same standard of living. But I don't want to monopolize the floor. There you go. So it's an economic revolution of sorts, a complete makeover, not just a complementarity. Well, quite a few countries in this world already have ministries of happiness. Yes, we've heard about the various models. We've heard about technological development that is going to lead to shorter working times. We've heard about this in the 50s and 60s, and we're not quite there, are we now? Yeah, because we have two types of people, those who are trying to seek out the truth and those who are defending the status quo, and we need to define and decide what we want to do. Well, that's even more of a point of departure for the rest of the discussion. Mrs. Mavits. Well, in effect, I quite agree with what Matej mentioned. The point is we need to change our mindset. We need to define what growth is. And absolutely, in this transitional phase, sharing economy is going to be complementary. It's difficult for things to change so very quickly. We see how long it takes for legislation to be adjusted and so on. So things need to be processed and so forth. And equally, as Mr. Sushnik said, building a hotel, all the pollution, all the noise, all the administrative procedures you have to go through. Well, yes, the buildings we're talking about were also built once, but things are now turning around a bit. If you look at Ljubljana's old town center, it's all one big hotel. Just things have changed. You had a house where somebody used to live in full-time, now you have people using it on a short-term basis. So the point is we're changing the use of things, of real estate in our case, and creating additional income. But that's about our future philosophy. And Mrs. Coutinho also wanted to add something earlier. Well, let me put it this way. Technology as such cannot simply solve things. Expecting that technology is going to solve things is an illusion. I'm old enough to remember when we started using computers, and it was said that computers are going to take the burden off our lives, but in fact they've put more burden on our lives. So as far as growth goes, the question is how you define growth. If we start looking at how to develop on a more sustainable way, then I see great opportunities here. If, however, we allow the largest multinationals to reap benefits, to make profits and pay zero taxes, then in the end we won't have taxpayers, which is something I mentioned earlier. We will no longer have taxpayers, and because of their very low purchasing power, if we will focus only on how to manufacture all of what we already have enough of, and we can't even sell enough of, then we will stop having consumers as well. So in fact it means that we are entering into a very important point in time in terms of our society, how we are going to organize ourselves, how we are going to regulate our lives to make it better for everyone. And without ethics, if greed remains the main value, then I think the consequences will be dire, and we already feel that they are negative. I think we would veer off in the wrong direction if we would say that technology offers transparency. Transparency enables transparency, provided that technology is used in a proper way, meaning that data have to be disclosed. You need to know what the platforms are, who is behind these platforms. Coming back now to consumer protection, you need to deal with dispute resolution and so on and so forth. Now, how to change people's mindset to make sure they actually do start collaborating, I think that's a question beyond all of us sitting here. But it is something that will be needed, because we stick way too much to what people believe instead of what the facts are saying. Mr. Sushnik, if we look into the future, in 20 years' time, are hotels still going to exist? Of course. No question about it. Because this is a model that cannot be replaced by anything else. Otherwise, it would have been over the past centuries. These are very realistic things. You see, in terms of sharing economy, right now we're somewhere between utopia and exploitation. Once you have a first serious lawsuit between a consumer using Airbnb and something happened, so between the consumer and the owner of the Airbnb, who didn't have his apartment in line with legislation, who wasn't insured properly, who didn't have this or that, as soon as that happens, the mindset will start changing drastically in the direction of protecting the consumer. And then it's going to become very clear that classical hotels, classical hotel operators who invested a lot of capital and who are regulated offer advantages. I'm not going to say that Airbnb is going to disappear, far from it. Now, the utopia presented by Mr. Cher can be sustainable if things are always balanced, if we always have enough even when you have peak demand. In January the 20th, we have more than enough hotel rooms available in Ljubljana. We have only 20% utilization, but in August we're all 100% booked. As for cars, sure, we can give up cars and we all collaborate, but who's going to own that car that we're going to all share? The state? That was Marxism, remember? We gave up on that. It doesn't work. So the point is that due to the needs we have, and all of us have these needs at the same time, the motorway to the coast on the 1st of August is completely congested, even though we're all collaborating. So you see, these models are quite questionable, and this is just an example. So I think that this model is going to develop slowly, organically, into a correct understanding of, okay, what am I renting out, how am I renting it out, how am I making money, and it's going to come back into the realm of a classical economy. But I am always happy to see any new approach in this field, because this also gives us, in the classical providers world, a look into potentials for development. Thank you very much. Many topics were now raised, which we could probably discuss all day. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to do that, but I would just briefly give the floor to Ms. Veverkova. I would like to hear your look at the future of the collaborative economy, of the sharing economy, as perhaps a future economic model which could, I don't know, save the world, let's say, or complement the existing economic system. And then I would also like to give the floor to the audience. I'm sure there are quite a few questions. We will only have 10 minutes available, but we will try to round up this debate.
But I think that both kind of economy can live together in compliance, in balance. Maybe some kind of traditional economy must be changed, adjust, but I think that the money saved in the alternative economy can be used in the standard economy, and it will be complementary each other. I think that is my. I don't think that only some technology will win. I think that it will be live in the balance in the next.
Hvala. Torej, odpiram debato še za publiko.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to open the floor for the audience. Do you have questions for our panelists concerning the topics that we tackled? Yes, I already have the mic, so I have to ask the first question, it seems. My name is Dragan Barbutowski. I am head of the Europa Misli, Europe Thinks think tank. I have a point I would like to make. Maybe it's more for the next panel, but it can also be a bridge to the next panel. So I have two questions. I cannot get rid of a feeling that we are forcing the American business model on Europe. Can we have more than one model? And are we mature enough in Slovenia to come up with a Slovenian model, or to have an impact on establishing a European economic model, because we don't have a lot of experience as a country. So how to come up with a business model that will be appropriate for Slovenia and for Europe? That's my question. Who are you addressing your question to? So what's different with this model? You have a service. The service is paid. You have income generated. You have an investment so that the service can be provided. In the first place, you have labor costs, you have material costs. So what is it that distinguishes this collaborative economy from traditional economy? What is it that cannot be regulated through traditional tax legislation? Well, I don't agree with this approach. I don't think it's just about the same economic model. I think we're speaking about a whole range of solutions. As I said, there are things that are quite similar to traditional services, like hotel services. But then there are also things that are not for profit, and where maybe social entrepreneurship is involved as well. So at this point in time, I wouldn't dare to say what are the possible ownership forms. And if certain solutions didn't work out in the past, that doesn't mean that they cannot be reinvented in the future. For example, I have a very good experience with cooperatives. Tax system provided incentives for cooperatives, and we were building apartments, houses together, but we simply abandoned that, and that was good in our previous system. So that's cooperatives. Then you have also intermediaries when it comes to buying products from farmers. Local production is encouraged, so prices can be lower, and so you can cancel too many intermediaries when buying products from farmers. So you really have to look at the whole picture, and you have to decide what you want to encourage. In Slovenia, I think we are too good at telling people what cannot be done. Instead, we should work more on how to open up this space, this environment, how to identify people who have ideas and then help them to implement them. I want to be more optimistic. I think Slovenians, we are too pessimistic, too critical as a nation, even though we're not doing so badly. I think OECD ranked Slovenia very high. No, Slovenians were ranked quite high as innovative people, but at the same time, we are living in an environment which kills all ideas before they are even developed. I could lecture you on this for hours based on just my experience. I could tell you about my personal experience just because I dared leading the Consumer Protection Organization, just because I thought that we are doing the right thing. And I'm not stopping because I'm sure that we are doing the right thing. And at this moment, I am having a serious problem because people who should invite us to work with them, I think I have some good references based on my work. I think decision makers in our country should finally get over this blockade, and we should finally start speaking about how to do something and forget about party membership. Mr. Chair, two views. First of all, we have to decide whether we want to be isolated, self-sufficient. Are we capable of being self-sufficient? If we are, we can do whatever we want. But if we want to continue buying Chinese, American, German things, then we'll have to be on equal footing in order to be able to survive, because nobody will want to trade with us if we are offering services and goods that are 10 times more expensive. So if we want to remain global players and to also play locally, then of course we'll have to use our infrastructure. But today, user experience is the guiding principle. Nobody is forcing anyone to go to an Airbnb apartment or city hotel, for that matter. Wherever I travel, I'm using Airbnb. 4 weeks ago, we slept in Berlin in an excellent apartment, and I enjoyed cooking together. But there are people who don't like it. Some people want to go to Four Seasons. It depends. I'm sure that we can use the same ingredients to cook a different soup, each and every one of us. Well, it depends what sort of standard you can afford. So yes, a common denominator, yes. Minimum standards, yes. But the problem will be if we are too slow there, because Industrial Revolution is bringing new platforms. And if everybody else internalizes them quicker, then we will not be doing that well. Our standard will go down. If we manage, however, to follow the average, then we can build on user experience to provide for differentiation. Today, opportunities are enormous. We all have opportunities to step out of the line and show how we are different. Mrs. Mavet. From the point of view of Airbnb, Airbnb is just a platform where you offer your apartment. And when you tick the box saying that you agree with general conditions, they say that you have to make sure that you are following the local legislation. So it is the Slovenian legislation that will say how this collaborative sharing platform economy will be working. So Airbnb launched a new idea, Booking launched a new idea, but we are the ones who are going to say how things will be done. It's not Airbnb. Yes, they just make things possible for us. We have another question over there, the gentleman. Luka Mišić from the law school in Ljubljana. A few months ago, and I'm going back to Airbnb, but we, users and providers, were asked to say that we agree with non-discrimination rules. Now, my question for Mrs. Kutin is, what do you think about this obligation to sign a contract as part of the collaborative economy? I'm not a lawyer, but I'm going to try and give you an answer. This is a broader problem, and it is mostly related to personal data protection, or even broader, with the use of platform. Our Norwegian colleagues printed out general conditions which are intended to explain to a consumer, to explain how services work, but they are instead used to just cover the back of the provider. And I think it took them days to print out and read the general conditions. So the only possibility we have is either to accept or to reject. If you reject the conditions, you cannot use the platform. And that applies not just to Airbnb, but to all other platforms. So we, consumers, we are in an impossible situation. We made a simulation where general conditions included a sentence, do you agree to sell your own child? And users never noticed. Do you think anyone reads those general conditions? And as we heard before, we know what is happening to our personal data. We believe that in certain cases, providers are getting data that they shouldn't have. So we are fighting for short and clear general conditions, non-discriminatory, because we know that today you cannot access a particular service if you don't tick that box. At this moment, I don't know what is the solution, because it's not just a Slovenian problem, it's a global problem. Anyone else from the panelists? Well, it's a highly complex matter. Microphone for the speaker, please. If you are a provider in traditional economy, then it is your obligation to sign a contract with the person coming to your hotel, let's say, independent of their personal circumstances, such as religion, sexual orientation. But in Airbnb, until recently, it was possible for providers to reject a certain possible customer on basis of religion, sexual orientation, and so on. So from now on, it will not be possible to discriminate. It would also not be possible anymore to refuse someone because of religion and so on. And it is also not possible for someone to refuse a guest at a later stage once they realize people's religion and so on. I'm afraid you're asking too much. In principle, you should not discriminate. How this is done technically, I'm not the right person. We can go to extremes here, of course. Well, if we don't discriminate, then I have the right to be with every girl, every lady, and vice versa. Why shouldn't we have a choice whom you want to offer your apartment or your car? But the question is, what needs to be regulated and what needs not be regulated? Microphone, please. I'm not familiar with the case. I would have to think before giving you an answer. I would like to go back to the previous question. Yes, and then we have to conclude. Well, general conditions have changed. And here, of course, this is about fear, about what a multinational can do once they have the power, because they can force providers, private owners, to adjust if they want to follow this economy model. And then we can continue. Airbnb may say how an apartment should be organized, what should be the layout, so you don't hurt anybody's feelings, what pictures are allowed, what religious symbols are allowed, what carpets are allowed. Once you give up your freedom, this is no longer sharing economy. What I'm concerned about is that this economy will be regulated not by the government, but by a multinational. Yes, may I just add, there are also some basic elements that need to be regulated, like safety, security. But if we go down that road, of course, we'll never stop this discussion. Yes, we have a third panel after the break, and I'm sure that there will be plenty more opportunities to clarify certain issues. I'd like to thank our panelists, and I'd like to thank you, dear members of the audience. I hope we managed to provide at least some answers to very hot questions concerning collaborative economy. And now I would like to invite you for a 15-minute coffee break in the lobby. I will continue in 10 minutes' time.